Hi everyone, it's Lynn Dion from Pink Whisper Designs. Today I wanted to show you what I'm going to call like a double embossing technique. We're going to emboss the cardstock with a brand new embossing folder from Tim Holtz, and I'll show you that here in a second. And then we're going to emboss the high spots of that area with some distressed glazes from Tim Holtz as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's take a look at this fun, festive embossing folder we're going to be using today. This is from the Tim Holtz 3D Texture Fades embossing folders, and this one is called Sparkle. I've got some Strathmore Bristol Smooth 100-pound cardstock. We'll run this through the Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Now I've got the platform, the embossing folder with the cardstock, and then I like to use just a couple of pieces of cardboard. You could stack up some cardstock here as well, but this works really well for me. They're just some old pieces of cardboard. I had some left from some leftover notepads. So now we're going to do some additional embossings. I've got my Distress embossing pen from Tim Holtz, and that's just got embossing ink in it. And this will allow us to do some detailed embossing. So let's take a quick look at the embossing glazes. These are the distressed glazes from Tim Holtz. I've grabbed several colors, and I will list and link all of the products I'm using today down below and also on my blog, and I'll also list the colors for you as well. So what we're going to do is add that embossing glaze to the high spots on this embossed panel. So what I'm doing is I'm coloring in on the high spots, those little dots at the top. Then I'll grab one of the distressed glazes and sprinkle on some of that embossing powder. Now I am using a separate sheet of scrap paper for each of my colors because I don't want to mix up all the colors, and I'll be going back and forth to the colors as we go along. So it's best just to grab a little piece of scrap paper for each of your colors, and then you can easily place these back into the containers when you're done. So you can see here for this little beaded chain, I want several different colors on this. So this is kind of a double embossing technique because we've embossed the panel, the card panel, and then we're going to add embossing powder over top. Now remember, with the glazes, they are fairly translucent, so anything that's underneath you will be able to see through. In this case, that's why I use the white cardstock, because I kind of want that brighter white behind each of these glazes. So now you can see that I filled in that entire piece. Now you could go ahead and heat set this. I'm going to do just a few more little sections, and then we'll do some heat setting. So now I'm going to grab another color, and these colors are just so beautiful. Now you could certainly do this entire project with gold, silver, and copper. That would be absolutely gorgeous if you were doing an anniversary card or a wedding card, or even a New Year's card would be really pretty. That's what I love about this embossing folder. I feel like it's good for birthday, wedding, anniversary, Valentine's Day. So this to me is going to be a go-to embossing folder. So I'm heat setting that with my heat tool, and that will bring a shine to these glazes. So I'm hoping you can see that up close and you get that really pretty glazed effect. So let's go ahead and fill in a few more areas. Now I'm kind of doing randomly on this chain. Let's go ahead and heat set this, and I'm just going to heat set, as I go along, different parts of it. You could heat set every time you add a color, or just do one little small section at a time, whatever you prefer. So once I get this heat set, you'll see that beautiful glaze over top of the embossed area. So let's go ahead and do this next little chain that's hanging down. I'm going to do this all in one color. So again, I'm just hitting the high spots with that embossing ink, and then we'll go ahead and sprinkle on some embossing glaze. Now you may be thinking, well, I could just rub my embossing ink pad over the top of this and hit those high spots, and then add my embossing powder and emboss that with the heat tool. The only thing is, because there are a lot of low spots on this, when you rub that ink over top, it's going to get on the rest of the area of the cardstock that's not embossed. It's not raised up enough. You're going to get a lot of ink down on those lower spots. And so then you're going to have glaze everywhere. I wanted to control the embossing. I only wanted it on the beads, the little chains or beads that are hanging down. So this is the easiest way to do that. Now it takes a little bit of time, but I didn't feel that it was excessive. I thought it was really fun to do, to be honest with you. It was relaxing and fun just to sit and kind of fill in the areas and change the colors. On this one, I'll do mostly blue, but then for some of those little higher areas, I'll do a different color. So it's really fun to mix and match these. And again, going back to some of your other colors, you could do this in a rose gold, which would be really beautiful. So kind of just coordinate it with the project you're working on. Today's card is, I guess, could be an anniversary card, a Valentine's card, a New Year's card. So we're just going to have some fun. We're going to be using some Tim Holtz stamps as well, and I'll show you those here in a few minutes. So once that panel was completely done, I cut another panel the same size. This measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, which we will be cutting down a little bit later on, but at this point I wasn't quite sure what size I wanted. So now I've got the Salvaged Patina Distress Oxide ink. Now remember, now that everything is embossed, we can go over the top of all of these areas. And then what we'll do is we'll rub off any excess ink with a dry towel. So I'm going to add this Distress Salvaged Patina ink all over this. And I don't want it to be perfectly even. I'm doing some light and dark areas. And then we'll grab the peacock feathers and we'll go right around these edges. At this point, I thought that was as dark as I wanted those edges to be, but you will see a little bit later on, I'm going to come in with a darker color. So again, I'm just kind of adding a few little areas and around the corners just to bring your eye in towards the center. And now I've got that dry towel and I'll just buff off any ink that's sitting on top of the glaze, because it just won't dry on the glaze. So you really need to buff it away, otherwise it will come off on your hands or on the recipient's hands, and you don't want that. So I've got my Wing of Stella clear glitter pen. I'm just squeezing that barrel of that pen a little bit to get some of that sparkle down onto my glass media mat. I've got a small number 0 brush, and I've added a little bit of water and I'm going to spatter that entire panel. And I'm hoping you can see some of that sparkle. So I let that sit and dry completely. And now I've got my chipped Sapphire Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to darken up those edges. I just thought this color would really bring your eye in towards the center and give it a little bit more of a festive look. Now we will need to buff off any excess ink again, just like we did before. So anytime you add ink over the Distress Glaze or any of your embossing powders, you want to buff away any of that excess. So now that that's all cleaned up, you can get a really nice look at this, and we've got that pretty sparkle in the background. Now I've got my bleed-proof white ink. This is a beautiful white ink, and it stays this bright white. I'll place a little bit on my glass media mat. Again, I've added a little bit of water from my Tim Holtz Distress Sprayer, and I'll go ahead and spatter this entire panel. And this just really gives it a festive, fun look and just ties everything together. You could certainly use some of that darker ink too. I did consider spattering on some of that chipped Sapphire ink, which I also think would be a beautiful look. So have some fun with this. Now here are these beautiful stamps, and these have been around for a little while. These are from Stampers Anonymous and the Tim Holtz collection. And I'm going to grab that large wine bottle. And these are the wine blueprints. And then I also have the mini wine blueprints. And again, I'll list and link these down below for you. But I thought this little glass and bottle of wine coordinated together perfectly. And that little set has the corkscrew, the little grapes. So it's a really great set if you want to do a nice little wine collection of cards for a friend. Because these stamps are so thick, they're the thick red rubber, I'm going to remove that pad from my Misty. This is the Mini Misty, so I've removed that little foam pad, and now we can go ahead and stamp these. I'm using the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and again, I've got some Strathmore Bristol Smooth cardstock, and then I'm using that Stampendable stamp press just to press those out. Now let's go ahead and do some coloring. I've got wine red and deep red. I'm using the Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens. These are a water-based pen, and I'm going to start with that lighter color, add a little bit of that darker color to the edges, and then we'll use the Zig blender pen to blend that out. Now you could certainly use a water brush here if you prefer. I just find I have a little bit more control with the blender pen. It's got a nice flow to it, but it doesn't get the paper too saturated. So I'm using that same technique, starting with the lighter color, adding a little bit of that darker color, and then pulling in towards the center. Now a little bit later on, you'll see that I just didn't think that was dark enough around the edges of the bottle. I thought it was still a little bit too bright. I wanted that wine bottle to look a little darker around the edges, so I'll show you that here in a second. But for now, I'm just adding these 2 layers of color. It's just easy just to add them right at the same time. And if I had thought about the third color at the time I was doing this, I would have added it at the same time as well. Now I've got a brand new blender pen. I thought the blender pen I was using was a little bit too dry, and you'll see how much easier this spreads with my brand new pen. It's got a nice even flow to it. I'm coming in with a little bit more of that darker red for right now and just blending that out. Now you do want to make sure you clean off that blender pen really well before you switch to the yellow and the mustard color. And then I'm adding the yellow first, a little bit of that mustard color, and then cleaning off that pen and blending that out. Now again, for this, I decided to add a bit more of a shadow a bit later on as well. So this is really easy and really fun coloring. So here's where I'm adding the mid brown. I wanted that, the top of the bottle, that little label on the top, to kind of look like gold. And I didn't want to use a gold pen, I just wanted to give it the look of gold. So I thought by adding that brown, it really brought out that yellowy gold color. Now I've got the haze blue to add to the glasses, just to give them a little bit of interest and a little reflection. Now let's grab the beige and mid brown. We'll start off with the beige, add some of that mid brown right around the edges, and then start pulling that in. Now I do want to keep that center area the lightest, so I'll just kind of leave that fairly light. We're going to be adding a label to that shortly. That little label that says wine bottle you can keep. I ended up having to restamp it because I had thrown all of that out. But if you're doing this along with me, keep that little word sentiment that says wine bottle. Other than that, you can cut these out just following the lines of the bottle and the glass. I did off camera stamp and cut out and color a second wine glass. Let's add a few little highlights using a white gel pen. I've got this panel that was originally 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm cutting about 1/4 of an inch off all the way around. So it'll measure 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I'm just going to darken up those edges just a little bit. I don't want them to be white, so I'll just take away any of that white that's showing. I'm just going to go back to that chipped sapphire and just use that brush and go along those edges and around the 4 corners just a little bit. And remember, every time you add ink to that glaze, you do want to wipe that away with a towel. Let's add that panel to our card. We've got a black card, top folding card that measures 4¼ by 5½. So that'll give us a nice black frame all the way around the edges. I've got my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and we'll glue those two together. Next, let's take a look at the Tim Holtz idea-ology quote chips. This one is called Theories, and you can see you get tons of these quote chips in here. And if you watch my videos, you know I absolutely love these quote chips. And this one says, love with all your heart. So again, Valentine's, anniversary, anything you want to, wedding would be really pretty with this as well. So I'm going back to that chip Sapphire and that little blending brush, and I'll add some of that ink around the edges. And again, it looks like cardboard on the edges, so you do want to finish that off. You could also emboss the edges as well. I've got the 2 wine glasses and the wine bottle, so let's go ahead and just kind of figure out where everything's going to be. I'm going to pop up the wine bottle, and I'm using some iCraft 3D foam tape. And then I'm just using my Cricut weeding tool just to pull the backing off those. I find this works really well. Just kind of poke it onto that backing and pull it right off. So if you have trouble removing the backing on your tape, this little tool is like the best thing ever. So let's go ahead and attach this, and then I'm going to just glue down the 2 wine glasses. And I kind of want them tipped a little bit, kind of like Shears, you know, tipped towards each other. But you could certainly line these up nice and straight if you prefer that. So I'm not placing that quote chip down yet because I want to tuck the base of these glasses just underneath it. You do want plenty of glue because you do have those high spots behind those glasses that you want to make sure you get a good adhesion of the glasses. And then I'll place plenty of glue on that quote chip and we'll glue that down. And you do want to hold that for a minute or two just to make sure it's securely attached. Now I do have a Signal gold pen, and I'm just going to add just a few little marks across the top and the bottom of that gold just to bring in a little shimmer. And then I'm going to add that Wink of Stella clear glitter on each of these wine glasses. At first I was just going to put it on the glass that the part that shows, but then I decided to put it over the entire glass. So that gave it a really nice shimmer and just made it a little more festive looking. Now here's where I came in with the mid brown. That wine bottle was really bugging me. I just didn't think it was dark enough around the edges. So I came in with the mid brown, and you'll see that I'm adding it around the edges and just bringing that in a little bit towards the center. And I really thought that was exactly what this needed. Just gave it kind of more of a warm effect. And I decided to do a little bit up at the top on that label as well. Now, there's where it says wine bottle. And again, I could have just used the one that I stamped earlier, but I had thrown it out. So I'm just grabbing a piece of scrap paper. I'll quickly stamp that again. But again, if you're doing this, just use the one that you originally stamped. And then I'm just going to follow the lines and cut this out. And I stamped that again with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So that's a nice permanent ink. So once I had this cut down, I'm going to place that on the label on the wine bottle. This would be a fun place to put Mr. and Mrs. or Cheers or anniversary, whatever little sentiment you want to put here. But I decided to use this little wine bottle label. We'll go ahead and glue that down. And then I'm going to go over the top of that with that Wink of Stella glitter pen. Again, just kind of tying that sparkle in. I've got the Sparklettes embellishments from Buttons Galore and More, and I use these a lot. I love these little hearts. I'm going to place a little heart on each of the wine glasses. Now you could, again, skip this part if you wanted to, But I just love that little pop of dimension on the front of the glasses. So let's take a closer look at the finished card, and you can see all that detailed embossing we were able to do with that embossing pen and our distressed glazes. We've got that pretty sparkle in the background as well. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really hope you have a happy new year, and I hope you had happy holidays. Take care. Bye-bye.